to go through the materials. You may notice there's two of me here. There's me talking, but there's also, I also have a bead mat here that has my stuff on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spotlight my bead mat. Oops, did you just do that for me, Scott?
Yes, I did. But I'll
it's okay, sorry. I'm used to fending for myself, but thank you. So here is the today's project. This is the beaded zigzag crochet. If I'll zoom in and you can get a closer look at the zigzag, it's basically a strip of simple crochet stitches and with beads dropped down the edge. So you can see it's really quite pretty. It's got a degree of elasticity to it. So you could, I mean, I've made these as a single wrap bracelet, but you could do a double wrap or more. And I think you could also use this as trim for clothing. You could sew this on the edge of, you know, like a t-shirt or something. I've seen this style called Tunisian crochet, but it isn't the kind of Tunisian crochet that most people think of, which involves a special long crochet hook. I think it's a Tunisian style edging. I think this is used in Tunisia and thereabouts to edge garments with, but it isn't really strictly Tunisian crochet. However, you don't really need to know that, but that's what we're going to do. So the two key things that you need are the yarn and the beads. Now I'm using crochet cotton for this. Here is some size 3 crochet cotton, which is a fairly sort of substantial. It's not the stuff you make doilies out of. It's enough. It's actually like garment weight. I'm using a brand called Aunt Lydia's, which you can get at Michael's and sort of all of the big chain craft stores. Comes in 2 common weights. There's Classic 10, which is much thinner than this, and this is Fashion 3, and it's ideal for this. I've done it with the finer thread, but it doesn't give you such a good result. So it's 100% mercerized cotton, comes in about 15 different colors, and the ball will set you back maybe $4 or $5. It's not expensive. So there's your yarn. Crochet hook, I'm using a 2mm crochet hook, which is at the, you know, the small end of the scale. You can use a slightly larger one, but you don't want to use a big chunky hook. So 2 or 3mm crochet hook. And the beads I'm using are Biggish by Beading Standards. They're a size 6 or 6/0, which is a bead sizing designation. Big enough to get the thickish thread through them, and also to, you know, to have a personality when you've finished crocheting them. So you can basically use anything that you can get on the thread. And I've done some other samples with different kinds of beads. Here's one with some spiky beads. These are called magatamas, and they're fun beads. Let's see here, I'll zoom slightly more so you can see them. You see it? How they have this kind of porcupine look to them? This one, the one with the yellow, is on the thinner crochet. You can see there's much less substance to the bracelet. It's kind of a nice elasticy sort of thing, but it's not. It doesn't have as much body to it as the thicker crochet. So you've got your yarn, you've got your beads, you've got your crochet hook. You'll need a button or something to make a closure with. This one here, I'm doing a button closure, so I've made a loop at one end, and the closure simply works like so. Very easy. Other kinds of closures, there's another button. This one here has a magnetic closure, sticking to everything in sight. So it's 2 little tiny magnets which just suck together. Each end has got a little tiny loop on it. Sorry about all the zooming, it's going to make me dizzy, but there's a little tiny loop here which you can use to sew it on with. I think you can see that. I get these from the local bead store. They're very inexpensive. They're less than $1 each. And they're actually great for this, nice and lightweight. A slightly fancier version of this is this one, which is also magnetic, but it's a much more substantial magnetic clasp. You can hear how that went ka-chunk, but it's a pretty decorative one. And this one has a bar and loop toggle clasp. Again, you can see that it's just sewn on with the cotton, and this one works like so, like a toggle. I quite like these. But I'll show you how to do and basically all of these are just sewing on, but I'll show you how to do the one with the button and the loop, because you're actually going to crochet the loop. So it's actually slightly more work to do that one. Okay, and one more piece of kit that you're going to need, and that is one of these, a big eye beading needle. Now, a lot of people have never seen one of these before. I was having a little discussion earlier on, you know, I hadn't come across these even when I'd been beading for a while, but they're wonderful for anything involving yarn and beads. It looks like an ordinary needle until you get a closer look at it, and then you realize that it's got a big, big, big eye that runs the entire length of the needle. It's almost like two needles that are stuck together at the ends. So you can thread a thick, chunky yarn that you'd never get through the eye of a regular beading needle, like so. So it's perfect for stringing beads on yarn. I got these at Bead Effects, which is my local bead store. This particular one is a 2.125 inches big eye needle. They come in larger sizes as well. This one is almost 4 inches long. The danger with these is they're pointy at both ends and you can poke yourself with them quite badly. So I tend to use the smaller ones, but before I came across the smaller ones, I used these all the time. They work just as well. If you can't find a big eye needle, you're going to have to improvise in some way. You can use a fine sewing needle if you can get the thread to go through the eye, and if you can get the beads to go over the needle. So if you can find something that works, it's fine. You don't have to use these. It's just my best option. Okay, with me so far? I have a tendency to just like talk and talk and talk and not get any feedback off people. So yeah, so far so good, okay? Just speak up if you have any questions. The first thing we have to do, and this is true for all beaded crochet, is that you have to string all the beads that you're planning to use. I've got small wrists and I need about 25 on each side of this, so I need about 50 beads to make one to fit me. But my wrist is about a 6-inch wrist, so I'm suggesting 60 to 70. It doesn't do any harm to string more beads than you're going to need, because when you're finished, the excess ones just come off and you put them back in the tube and you can use them again next time. So I'm going to do this right now. It seems like maybe silly to watch me stringing beads, but it's really quick. You can get an idea of how I'm doing it. So I'm going to count out about 4, 6, 8, 10. I'm going to count out about 60. So that's 10. That's about 10. That's about 10. You see, it doesn't have to be accurate. 50, 60. And then I'm just going to pick them up on the needle. One alternative you can do, and it's slower, but it does work, is that if you take some glue that dries hard, you can make a needle on the end of your thread by dipping it in glue and letting it dry until it's hard and stiff. And then becomes a self needle. You can pick up the beads actually directly on the thread. And if you can't find a big eye needle and you can't find a suitable substitute, that actually might be your best bet for this.
Gillian, I do have a question.
Yes.
I do not have beads. I have little metal pieces of
Okay.
trinkets almost.
If the hole, I mean, if you can treat them like they were beads, if you can string them through the hole,
Yes.
it should still work. How big are they?
Anywhere from about 1/2 inch to maybe 1/4 inch. Some are beads, some are dangles. They're little hampsas.
Oh, right. Yes, yes. That, you know, that might work. I don't know. You just have to try it. They're a bit bigger than the beads, but I don't see why they shouldn't work.
And I don't have as many as you have. I have 2, 4, 6, 8. I only have 8, so I'll have to spread them out.
Yeah, well, you can. I've done tricks with how many beads I use here. This is a bead. This is every position you can put a bead in. But I've done them where I've only put beads along one side because I wanted to make a necklace. So you can do that. And you don't have to put a bead in every position. You can just simply omit one. So when we get to that point, I'll kind of indicate what you'd do if you weren't dropping a bead. So if you could make a necklace where you just put them on one side and you just did a section in the middle that had the charms and the rest was just crochet. I've never tried that, but that's actually kind of a neat idea.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. So see how long that didn't take? That's a really quick process. It's a good idea to put your yarn in a bowl or something so it doesn't bounce away when you're pulling thread. I'm doing this off screen, so you can't see when it goes on the floor. But it's a good idea to use a yogurt pot or a wooden bowl or something to put your yarn in. You want to slide most of the beads all the way down the thread out of your way, because you don't need all the beads right away, and you don't want, let me put the extra ones away here. You only need a few at a time. So I've got most of them out of the way down the thread, and here's my working end. I'm just about to get started. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make a slip knot in your crochet cotton. So the way you do that is you rotate your short end over the long end and pull up a loop like so. And you can tighten that by pulling on the short end. I didn't realize for years that there's 2 ways of doing this. You want it short end over long end. Put this right here. And pull it up here so that you can tighten it by pulling the short end. If you do it the other way, it'll tighten when you pull this, and it will get really rigidly tight as you start crocheting. So it's handy to do it this way. It doesn't really matter, either way works, but this way you will have the ability to keep this first loop loose. And you kind of need that in this case. You don't want that first loop to be like pulled down tight on the hook. You want to keep it kind of squidgy. Then I pull a few beads down near the hook because I'm going to need them. And this is how I hold the yarn. I wrap the yarn around my little finger a couple of times, and then I bring it across my palm, and I put my 4th finger under it like so. And then I can hold on to the loop here. You don't have to do that. You can just simply hold it in a bunch in your hand like this. But this is kind of like a proper crochet as a way to do it. Okay? And again, I'll do this multiple times, plus you can also watch the video. So the first thing you want to do here is you're going to make a slip stitch. And a slip stitch is you bring the yarn over the hook from the back to the front, hold on to this knot here, and pull the yarn through like so. That's a slip stitch. The class I did 2 weeks ago, that was the entire crochet. You just did slip stitches. But every so often you drop a bead down the thread towards the hook, hold on to the knot, bring the yarn over and pull the yarn through. And that is a beaded slip stitch. So that's what you start this with. You start with one regular slip stitch and one beaded slip stitch. Again, I'm going to do all this all over again. Now, the next thing you do, this is slightly unusual. You take the bottom piece here and you take the hook back into that first stitch, like so. It's always a little weird. This is the only time that you do this as you're starting. And you're going to do a single crochet stitch in here. Single crochet is yarn over, pull it, hold the knot, pull it through that first stitch. So you've got 2 on the hook, yarn over, pull it through both stitches on the hook. And again, I'll do this multiple times. So you've now got a little kind of triangular wedge here with a bead sticking out towards you. Then you're going to drop a bead and do a slip stitch. Now, I know I'm going fast. Is anybody trying to keep up with me at this point? Because I'll stop and let you catch up. I'll take that as a no. Now, this is where it gets interesting. This is not a normal crochet move. You're going to take the piece of work here and you're going to turn it around so that the bead that was pointing towards you, towards the handle, is now pointing away from you. And you're going to go under the bead here, pull it towards you, and do another single crochet stitch. So that's 1 yarn over, pull it through, another yarn over, and pull it through 2. And that's basically it. You just repeat this over and over. Drop a bead, do a slip stitch rather, turn it around, go in under the bead, bring the bead towards you, do a single crochet, oops, got to keep the bead towards you, do a single crochet through 1 and then through 2. I'm doing this at arm's length, it makes it a little tricky. Drop a bead down the thread and do a slip stitch. Rotate it under the bead, bring it towards you, do a single crochet, drop a bead, do a slip stitch, rotate it away from you. See how quickly that's growing? And you see the zigzag way that it's forming? Okay. Have I completely lost anybody yet? Okay. I'm going to start it.
I'm totally new, so I'm just going to watch.
Yes, that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. I'm going to start this completely from scratch again because the first little bit is slightly difficult. Once you get the rhythm, it's just the same two stitches over and over. And the only difficulty you'll have as a beginner is just managing the thread and the beads, right? And oh, I should point out, I noticed yesterday, oh my God, there is a 1-word error in the handout. And it's an important word because when I talk about putting the hook under the bead here, and in the handout I say push it away from you, it doesn't work, it will not work. You have to push it towards you. So if you're using the handout, you know, make a great big note in red, the bead has to come towards you because it won't work otherwise. I'm sorry about that. I don't know how that snuck in. Okay, I'm going to go right back to the beginning start. The great thing about crochet is if you don't like it, pull it out. You can always go back and start right from scratch. So you're going to make a slip knot. Put the crochet hook in, tighten up the slip knot, but not too tight. You need some wiggle room in this. Slide some beads down the hook, round your little finger, across your palm, underneath your first finger. Now, there's 2 ways of actually doing it. You can either hold everything like this and then put the yarn over like that, or you can hold it with your second finger and use your first finger to produce tension. I use both methods depending on what I'm doing. For slip stitch, for chain stitch rather, this works great. For things that involve a bit more force, sometimes it's good to be able to grab it like that. So you've got your slip knot on the hook, you're going to do a chain stitch, you're going to let a bead drop down, you're going to put the yarn over and do a beaded chain stitch. Don't pull it too tight, you want to have some loose here. Flip it around, go through the first chain. This often requires a little bit of wiggling. Don't pull it too tight. You're going to make a single crochet here. Single crochet is yarn over, pull it through the first stitch, yarn over, pull it through both stitches. That's a single crochet. Then you're going to drop a bead, do one chain stitch, turn it over, go underneath the bead, pull the bead towards you, do a single crochet. That's 1 and 2. Drop a bead, yarn over. See, I'm doing it without even thinking. As you drop the bead, when you get back into position, you're doing the yarn over, and do a slip stitch. I keep saying slip stitch, a chain stitch. I beg your pardon. My voice is not doing what my brain is telling it to do. So rotate the work, go under the bead, pull the bead towards you. You need to do a single crochet stitch, so yarn over, pull it through the first one, yarn over, pull it through both. Drop a bead, do a chain stitch, rotate, go under the bead, pull the bead towards you, do a single crochet, that's part 1, and that's part 2. Drop a bead, yarn over, chain stitch, rotate it, go under the bead, pull the bead toward you, yarn over, through and through, drop a bead, chain stitch, rotate, under the bead, pull it towards you, single crochet, drop a bead, chain stitch, rotate, under the bead, and see the bead is trying to get away from me here. You've got to keep the bead, I'll take that out. In fact, the bead has to come towards you, like so. Single crochet, sometimes they misbehave. Drop a bead, chain stitch. So if you wanted to skip some of these beads, you do it like this. So let's say I want to have a section with no beads coming up. So I'd go under the bead, single crochet, and then instead of dropping a bead and doing a beaded chain stitch, I'll just do a chain stitch. Rotate it, under the bead. I'm going to do beads on one side and not on the other. So drop a bead. Sorry, ahead of myself here. I'm going to finish the single crochet and then drop a bead. Single crochet, beaded chain stitch, rotate. And now there's no bead to go under here, so I have to go into where the bead would have been if I dropped a bead. So you see how there's a kind of a bump here? So that's the thread. That's the thread that the bead would have been on. It may not be clear on the screen, but it's kind of clear in person. You see how the beads line up? This is where it would be. So you're doing your single crochet here. And then you're not dropping a bead, you're doing a chain stitch. Rotating, under the bead, pull it towards you, single crochet, drop a bead, rotate. So you see I'm getting beads on one side and not the other now. So find the right stitch to go through. It doesn't have to be the right stitch, actually. There's a lot of stitches that this will work on. Sorry, too close. Single crochet. Don't drop the bead, chain stitch, rotate, under the bead, push it towards you, single crochet, drop a bead, chain stitch. See how I'm now getting the beads just along one side. So does that answer your question about the charms? I think that's a good way of doing it. I would get some beads and practice this with the beads first, because it makes it easier to find the right place to put the hook. But yeah, I think it's totally the right way of doing it. The other thing is you could do this with a heavier yarn, especially if you've got large charms. This might not be strong enough to support them. It's quite elastic, so you might find it stretches out badly. But if you could use something like a fine polyester cord or something, that might work very well. I use stuff called, don't I have any here? I use a cord called seal-on beading cord for crochet. This is actually thinner than the stuff I'm using, but it's very strong. Seal-on bead cord. And it comes in a heavy weight as well. And it's very non-stretchy. So you could try something like that for if you were trying to support heavier charms than beads. I've got a comment saying, what's this here? How about beading wire instead of cord? You can do, let me just take the spotlight off the bead mat for a minute here. Right. Yes, you can do crochet with wire. I don't think this will work. To be honest, I haven't tried it. But this is a more dense kind of fabric crochet, and typically wire doesn't work very well with dense. It works well if you're making a loose open chain. So you can certainly absolutely use wire to make a beaded chain. And that is like the standard standard wire crochet thing to do, is you make a long chain of chain stitches with or without beads in them, and then you can braid them together to make jewelry. This, I don't know. I mean, it might work, but I think there's too much twisting. When you're doing this action, twisting it on the needle, what tends to happen then is the wire kinks and breaks. However, I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm saying it might be actually worth a try. So why don't you try it and let me know if it works? Okay, I am going to rip out this bit I did without the, no, I'm not. I'm just going to continue. I'm going to make enough of a length of this so that I can show you how to do the end piece. It's going to look a little weird, but never mind that. And then I'll show you how to sew the button on at the end. So we'll just start putting beads back in it again. So I'm through my stitch that would have had the bead on it. I'm doing a single crochet. I find I talk to myself in my head when I'm crocheting, because you got to keep track of the pattern, even if it's a simple one like this. And I certainly do it when I'm beading. I mean, I don't know if that makes me strange or something, but well, I don't know. Do you do that? So you can see that after you've done this for a bit, and I'm just holding the yarn in different ways here. Once you've got okay with manipulating the thread and the beads, you can chug along at a pretty fast rate with this. You could knock off a bracelet in a half an hour easily. once you're quick with the actual crocheting. And if you are using something thicker, like a knitting yarn and some big hole beads, you could make a big chunky thing quite quickly as well. I did have to say that you're rotating this the same way every time. I have never actually experimented with rotating it in different ways, but I think you'd end up with a slightly wonky look because the twist is part of the pattern. That's how you get the zigzag. Oops. See, I'm not talking to myself, so I'm getting ahead of myself with the stitches here. It's slightly weird talking to yourself in front of an audience. It's one of the things that happen when you teach online.
Thank goodness we have these, though.
Absolutely, yes. Right. But it's like, you know, normally it's just me inside my head, and now I've got like 20 of you all like listening to the things that go through my head as I work. Strange, strange times.
Where is this based out of? Where are you from?
I'm in Toronto, but you know, that's the other nice thing about cyberspace is that it's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I'm teaching a longer class this evening on a different platform. And I know I've got people from other parts of Canada, and I think I've got somebody from New York State as well.
Wow.
So yeah, it doesn't matter, you know, so long as they've got the materials and they've got Wi-Fi, you know, they could be in Timbuktu. Well, maybe not, but you know what I mean. Muskoka.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, that was not meant to be a casting aspersions on Muskoka. You know, you really got to watch it. Now, I did something wrong there. What did I do wrong? I was not paying attention.
When we do our garden club on Thursdays, we have a lady that chimes in from Vancouver.
Really? That's interesting.
It's incredible garden because her weather's completely different than ours, so it's really cool.
That's completely unfair, I'll tell you.
I'm from Vancouver too.
He's lovely.
That's the Zoom garden club, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that and it looks quite interesting. Are you having fun with that?
Been enjoying that. Yeah, it's been great. And different themes every week. We've been doing preserves and keep maintaining your seeds. And the beginning of the year was like sprouting things. So now we're going into fall things you do with your garden in preparation, I guess. Great topics every week. Very enlightening. I enjoy it.
That's a really good idea. It's not something that would have struck me as something that you would have as an online meeting, but you know, hey.
What is that called? I'm interested in that one.
It's our garden club, and it's Thursday at, I think, from 2 to 3, Scott, or 1 to 2. And there's 2 more weeks for this session, and then we have 3 in November.
Yeah, if you look at the calendar, it's just garden club. There's November garden club and October garden club and all that sort of thing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's quite popular.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm not going to do this full length, but you see how this is coming along. It's got a gap tooth section here, but that's fine. One of the things, if you want this to be kind of symmetrical when it's finished, you see it, because it works on a zigzag, you start on this side and you go da-da-da-da-da-da-da like that. So you kind of want the end to finish on this side so it'll be symmetrical. It's a small touch, but I like to finish it off like this so that the two edges are how can I describe it? So it's got the same number of beads on each side. That's what I want to say. So I finish with a slip stitch like so. So you've got 2 things you can do here. If you're going to do a sew-on clasp, like this, where you're just sewing the two halves of the clasp on, or like this, where you're just sewing the two halves of the clasp on, you can simply cut your thread, pull it. These are all the excess beads I don't need to go back in the tube. Cut the thread with about 6 to 8 inches, cut it, take one more chain stitch, just pull it through, pull the hook through, and you finish the end, and then you can use the tails to sew the clasp on with. However, if you're going to do a loop for a button, you need to do something slightly different. And I'm going to do this. This may not be the obvious way, but there's a reason for doing this. I'm going to take a safety pin, which is the crocheter's favorite tool, and I'm going to put it through the loop here to secure it while I work on this end. And there is a reason for this. I'm going to use the tail here to sew the button on. And you want to put the button on first, because you're then going to make a loop to go around the button. And it's easier to do that if the button is already secure. And you don't know what size of loop you're going to need until you've got the button in place. I've been caught out this way before. So I'm going to take a darning needle. You can use the big eye needle for this as well, but a big darning needle is, oh, actually, this isn't going to work because this button has a small shank. Oh yes, it will, it'll go through. Make sure the needle goes through the button before you use it. Thread the needle. I'm going to make this come out a little bit away from the end. I don't want the button right at the end, but you can do it either way. You can have the button on the surface or actually hanging off the end of it. Either way, doesn't matter. So go through the button shank, and then it's just like sewing a button on a shirt. Go through the band. Oops. And this is good, strong yarn, so you really only need to go through it a couple of times. There's no right way or wrong way to do this. You just want to do it as neatly as you can. So I've gone through that 3 times. And then I like to do a knot. So make a stitch, leave a little loop, and then go through the stitch here to tie a half hitch knot. And then stitch through it again. And then use a small pair of scissors. Which I didn't bring out, but I'm going to use a large pair of scissors just to cut the yarn. I used to use fray check to stop the end of the yarn from fraying, but honestly, if it's buried, you don't need to. So there's your button. Then we're going to come back to the end with the safety pin in it on your live loop. Pick up your yarn again, and then we're going to crochet just some chain stitches to make a loop to go over that button. So this is same thing, yarn around my little finger, cross my palm underneath my finger like so. And we're just going to make some chain stitches. And that's yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through. They don't have to be, it doesn't really matter if they're not particularly even or, because this is all going to get pulled straight and tight. If you do too many, you can just pull a few out. And you want this long enough to make a loop that will go around your button. And every time you test it, you can use your safety pin to stop it from pulling out. This is going to be a bracelet for a Barbie doll. Make the loop. Boop, 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 boop. My fingers are kind of flobby today. That looks about right to me, but I can test it by slipping it over the loop. That's actually a little big because that loop's going to stretch. So I'm going to pull out a couple of stitches and try it again. If you don't use the safety pin, you're going to have grief. Trust me. That's more like it. You don't want this to be too leggy, too long and stretchy. Okay. So then this is when you can cut the yarn on this side. Preserve the live loop at all times. Cut the thread. And do one last yarn through and pull the thread through and secure it. Okay? And then you can use your darning needle or your big eye needle to sew this end of the loop in place down here. So that's just like you did with the button. Just overhand sew it a couple of times. This stitch disguises the sewing in remarkably well. I used to worry about exactly how to do these stitches, but with this yarn and this stitch, you don't see any nasty lumpy bits. It's amazing how it just kind of disappears. Okay, and then do a slip knot, and then just bury the end in a couple of stitches. You may want to do this in a fancier way than I do, but this is very, very adequate. Snip the thread, and there's your loop, and there is your closure. Easy peasy. And some Barbie somewhere is going to love that bracelet. Okay, so any questions?
Yeah. Why doesn't mine look like yours?
What does it look like?
Can you see it?
Hold on a second, let me. If you speak, it'll make you big.
Okay.
Yes, I see it.
What did I do wrong?
It's very dark. I can't see, and do the stitch under the bead on the opposite side. So, of course, so I finished this. I don't have anything to show you, but basically,
The bead under the other side. Okay.
every time you do the rotation, you do this, the beaded slip stitch on this side, and then you rotate it, and then you do a stitch under the bead on the opposite side. So I would guess that you weren't rotating it, because that's how you get the width of the bracelet.
Okay.
Did you get the instructions? Did you download the
I did.
instructions? Because
I did, yes.
it's all these instructions are a bit concise, like it's written very abruptly.
Uh-huh.
But if you go through that step by step, you should get the right result. Let me just demonstrate that bit again so that I can see if that is what you're doing wrong. Give me some beads here. So I've done one chain stitch and a beaded chain stitch, and then I'm rotating it, and I'm just, for the first time, I'm just going through that first chain stitch, doing a single crochet. Come. I pulled the loop a little bit too tight because I was in a hurry. That's what happens, is it gets difficult to do if you pull that loop too tight.
Okay.
Okay, so there's my beaded chain stitch. Now, this is the point where you're getting the width. You're rotating it. So the bead that you added in the previous step is pointing towards the handle. You rotate it so it's pointing away from you.
Okay.
You go under that bead and you pull the bead towards you.
Okay.
And then you do a single crochet under that bead.
All right. Thank you.
And that's, you see those two, the width is the difference between that first bead and that second bead.
Okay.
What you figured out what you were doing?
I think so.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That's great. Anybody else following along?
I am. See, I did it.
Okay, let me have a look at you here.
I only did 4 or 5, but
Oh, that's good. Yes, yes. You know what you can do? Let me just highlight to you, Jagger. Where are we? Spotlight. Here you go. That's great. Yes, and you're using contrasting colors so you can really see what you're doing. You can actually use those to make earrings as well. If you make a short around the fingers and like that, it's so that you constantly can, you know,
I'm sliding the bead, it's little loose. That's why.
Yes, when it's okay. So you slide the bead out. Sometimes, if you're not comfortable with managing the beads, sometimes you have to kind of let go of everything to slide the bead down, like so. So I'm letting go of everything. I'm sliding a bead down. When you do the next step,
Yeah.
And everything's kind of loose, like this.
Yeah.
Just stop and just snug it up.
Tighten it. Oh,
just
okay.
like that. Just
Next
tighten
time I will
it.
do
Yeah,
it.
a little bit like that. And then, like the same thing with same thing with every step. If you're just holding the yarn in your fingers, and I find it difficult to do because I'm so used to wrapping it around my fingers, but
yeah,
just snug it up after each step. Just make sure that it's not loose. You've got a moment at the end of each step where you can just tighten it up like that.
Okay.
You don't want it, you know, it shouldn't be rock hard, but it should be not.
That's why. See,
floppy.
it's loose. It's not tight enough.
Yes, well, it's just a question of managing tension. So that's a question of practice. And if you do this a lot, you'll learn how to do like single crochets and chain stitches.
Thread is also it's thin, right? Normally we work on thick wool, and this is very thin, so it's little hard. Yeah,
it's different.